So thank you very much for coming today. I feel very honored that you would be interested in hearing this talk about my little game that I made just over a year ago. I guess a year and a half at this point. Yeah, so this is a post-mortem of my first commercial game that I made, or that I sold, I should say. And this is sort of I'm going to go into the development of it, how it did sales-wise, critically wise, and also basically how I consider it a success, even though it was not necessarily a financial success. So what is Pictassembler and who am I? I'm Dan Williams. I'm in the Boston indie game dev scene. I have a day job that is not video games at this time. So take what I say with a grain of salt, but I've also been, I study the industry very heavily, have been for a very long time, and I've also been working on games as a hobby for about 25 years now. So it's been kind of something I've always wanted to get into, I've always been interested in. But this is the first commercial project that I made and sold. So Pictassembler, as it shows here, that's the title screen that I put in my game. As you can see, it's very minimalistic, is what I like to call not putting much effort into the art. And it's just a puzzle game. It is an engineering puzzle game. If you're familiar with the Zachtronics types games, like Opus Magnum and Factory, or those types. Octopticom is also a really good one. I wanted to make a game like that because I was playing those games a lot at the time, as well as Picross. So there was a lot of influence from those in that. I will show a little trailer here. Hopefully the audio comes in. If not, you get to just check it out. So as you can see, the game operates with a mouse. I'm attempting to construct a pixel art image of a boat in the demo video here. And I do that by placing little operator blocks around the field so that when I release a little ball that essentially places the tile, when they combine, because they stick to each other, it will actually create a little image that gets displayed here. So you can see in this stage, I have a bunch of operator blocks laid out. I hit play to release the ink ball. I never really came up with a good name for that, which I will go into once this is over. Then you can see I basically automate the little process to do the little pixel art image, or the tiled image, as it is. And then if you set everything right and you get everything going, it draws the picture and you win the level. And that is how it goes. And then you can see my very minimalistic menu system there. So when I created this game, these speaker notes are not showing up in my presentation, but that's okay. When I created this game, it was actually inspired from the mechanics that I built into another game. So I was working on this other game called Gnome Rads, where it was kind of like a Legend of Zelda little adventure kind of game. But instead of having combat, I wanted to have puzzles, engineering puzzles that you would solve in the overworld instead. So I came up with this idea after noodling on some other mechanics. And then one day I just thought, well, what if, because I was playing a lot of Opus Magnum, I was playing a lot of Picross, I thought, what if I just took these mechanics, could I abstract them into a casual puzzle game to basically just make something that could be really fun. I never really made a full, complete game other than something in a game jam before, so I thought I would give it a shot. So I did, and it was a lot of fun to make. It was a lot of fun to get sort of people's feedback on after the fact, after I shipped it. But it was a lot of fun. The original mechanic that I had gotten for it was something that essentially came to me in a dream where I was envisioning there were these resources that were moving around in some mystical world, and they would fade in and out of reality. And when they would fade in and out of reality, they would appear differently. And so your job as the investigator was to find out what was happening outside of your reality to these items that cause them to sort of change elements. And I iterated on that design a lot because I really like the investigation aspect of it and sort of a deduction. But it didn't quite end up being that fun the more I worked on it. Especially when I tried to implement something like some mathematics system or anything like that. And so I also was playing a lot of manufacturing games at the time, like Factorio. Shapes.io wasn't out then, but it's something very similar. Factory Idle is something very similar. In those games, you are building an assembly line with conveyor belts, and you're combining resources and then making other resources and then making resources out of those resources. And there's this massive tech tree that you run into and you go through the game with that. And it's very complex, and I didn't really have the energy to do that kind of thing. So I just made a different kind of game. So as I was working on this design of changing the elements of these objects and having them move through like a little production line, I realized that my game was starting to resemble the factory type games more so. And whenever I look at Factorio, as wonderful and as brilliant as that game is, I just think about the engineering that has to go into that to make everything work smoothly on a giant scale. And you have so many objects that are, that have the properties in it, and they mutate all the time. So it is a development headache. So I didn't want to do all of that. I decided instead to, in my adventure game, put the engineering to have an assembly line system, but I didn't want to make all the conveyor belt objects because I thought that may be too much and it may overwhelm game makers. So instead, I decided to have the elements sort of free floating in the world, and when they hit a corner, essentially they could be redirected. And so that's how you direct the flow of materials as they get developed in the game. And then once I thought of that, and then once I tried to build on the concept of building little shapes as well, the idea sort of formed out of that. There have been other developers who have sort of said that during the development of a game, you have to find the fun, but also the mechanics of a game can sort of stick out to you as something that is sort of worth pursuing. In this case, as I was working on it, and I'm actually going to go back to, well, I guess I can't go back to the demo screen because then that will break things. The appeal of the puzzle design in the game ended up coming from when you stack blocks together, they stick to each other. And so if you are building a larger abstract shape, you have to time where the blocks are going to hit each other because they stick to each other. So you can box yourself out when you're building this design if you are not careful. So the development of the game, it took 1 month for me to essentially throw the entire thing together. It was a very quick development time, but mostly the reason for that was because I already knew the mechanic that was going to be in it from iterating on the design of the adventure game Gnome Rats. So I was able to basically build out puzzles very quickly, build out the concepts for what makes those puzzles interesting very quickly. But I still didn't quite get it to where it needed to be. At the time, like I said, I was playing a lot of Picross as well. So in my mind at the time, I thought, well, if the gameplay of these puzzles is interesting enough, then it doesn't really matter how varied they are from puzzle to puzzle, because something like Picross, something like crossword puzzle, something like Sudoku, it's the same thing over and over and over, but because the process of deduction in those games is so interesting and so fun, the player doesn't really mind. In my game, because there is more of an action element into it than those other games, it actually does make a difference, and I do think that the game suffered from a lot of the levels being either very similar or very tedious to go through. So it didn't quite hit as good as I would like. It has gotten very good reviews from some people. Some people really do seem to like it. But I think that was a large part as to why it didn't. It hasn't really generated through word of mouth from people that have played it. Also, I did all the art myself, in case you couldn't tell by the beautiful programmer art, and I made all the music myself too. I used this application for the iPad that mimics the Yamaha Tenori On. So it's basically like this music sequencer app. I think it was like $20. It was very cheap. The instrument, if you were to buy it, it's something like $1,200 or $1,500. It's ridiculous. But the app is very cheap, and you can make very high quality music for very cheap. And it's very simple to use, really easy interface. I really enjoy working in that. When the game was released, at the time, I was sort of going through sort of like a personal crisis, like imposter syndrome kind of thing, and I really wanted to get this game out before the end of the year after I started working on it. It was just sort of a goal that I give to myself for no reason whatsoever, other than to just give myself a feeling of accomplishment. The game sales up to date at this point, I released on December 24th of 2019. I have since earned roughly $300 from it in that time. So not a blockbuster, if you'd say. It's no Fortnite, but it's more than I expected after I launched it. Before I launched it, I thought, well, I could see this game doing roughly 2,000 sales or whatever. Set my expectations low. I did not set my expectations low enough because I had seen the landscape of the market for puzzle games like this, and I thought, that I could compete in this market very easily, simply because there just weren't that many other games like it. And in a way, like, they're still kind of not for exactly what I'm bringing to the table with Pictassembler. So I do plan on working on a sequel of sorts, a spiritual successor eventually. Yeah. For Itch, I have gotten $12 in sales. However, because of the title of the talk, ways that I define success other than financially, I wanted to go on why I still consider this a success. For one, I have recouped the cost of uploading to Steam, so there's a success there. Obviously, I couldn't survive on a year for $217. We'll live on the moon, so wages mean something here. But the itch downloads that I've gotten are, as of today, 1,668. And the reason why that is because when the game was released, it didn't do much traffic. I was actually kind of bummed out from it. But then the fine people at Itch decided to put a giant game bundle together for helping with racial injustice. And even though my game is not, in any way political, I am very political. So I wanted to include my game in that bundle. I figured at the very least, it would help buff up the numbers of the games that you get in the bundle, which people appreciate. People like getting deals. And so that racial injustice bundle did very, very well. I think it I should have gone back to get the numbers, but I think it did something like $7 or $8 million or something like that for legal defense funds. So it was just a massive success, and I was very, very proud to be a part of that. Initially, also, I was proud to be a part of it, but then I thought that that my game would just sort of like fall through the cracks and nobody would really notice it. But because I have gotten over 1,500 downloads, I get steady downloads all the time from it, and it feels better to be a part of something knowing that people are actually responding to it and that they're getting the value out of that, and that they helped for a great cause, and I helped contribute to that. Additionally, there is another bundle that is going, I think it's out today on itch, a bundle for Palestinian aid, for the the troubles and just the absolute atrocities that are being done to the Palestinian people now. So there was another mega bundle put together for that that's going to be advertised later today, I believe. So Pictassembler is part of that as well. The lack of sales of my game, if I were to analyze it, which is what you're here for, I only have so much time. I have a million theories about how markets work and what people respond to and all that. But basically, I think it was mostly the art in the game. You saw it's very minimal looking. It's not very pretty. I tried to put some juice in there when you're actually playing through the game. So there's a sound effect for every action that you take. There's a visual response to every action that you take. So the actual playing of it is pretty juicy, but it definitely could have been better. The mechanics of the game ended up being a lot more abstract than I sort of planned it to be. Like if I were to tell any game developer, oh yeah, it's going to have pixel art images in it that you construct with production line, I think most game developers will be like, oh yeah, I can kind of see those mechanics. But if you try to tell this to people who play games that are not already into the puzzle game sphere, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't know why I would want to make pixel images. They don't even know sometimes what I mean when I say pixel images, which I think is surprising. And then doing those with an engineering mechanic, it just doesn't get there for a lot of people. Even when I have people play test the game, which I didn't do much of. I only had essentially one friend of mine did all the play testing for my game, my buddy Tom. And even though, like the feedback I got from him was amazing, I didn't get anywhere near as much feedback as I should have. When the game got out through itch and people were actually downloading it and playing it, I've seen a couple plays on YouTube where people are playing through the beginning stages, and I can see clearly where they're not understanding the concept. So I didn't teach it well enough. And other friends of mine who bought the bundle, and then I would watch them play through like a Twitch stream or something. I realized essentially if I had done just the slightest bit of playtesting with a larger group of people, the game could have done way, way better. But I didn't do that because I was being impatient. So let that be a very valuable lesson to you. Also, well, I didn't have, you can see lack of name recognition. Nobody knows who I am. This is my first commercial game. That's to be expected with these smaller projects. So I didn't have my hopes that high. I was hoping that it would do a little bit better in some of the communities that I'm in terms of like Discord and Facebook and all that. But that didn't really make any waves either. I did want to say one thing about the art, which I think is another very valuable lesson that I've learned, is that if the art in the game is not at a certain proficiency and you do not have this name recognition for people that already understand that you know how to make a game, then you lose a lot of trust in the beginning player to understand that the game's mechanics are actually interesting. So, for example, Steven's Sausage Roll is a brilliant game made by a brilliant developer, and the art style that he chose is a very like low poly, sort of rough-edged kind of look. And that game does not sell because of the art. But when I see people talk about it, they do not have very good words for it, which is unfortunate because I dig the art style in it. However, the word of mouth and Stephen Lavelle / Ink Repair, the goodwill that he has generated through his other games push people through to play it, and then they explore the mechanics and they get a lot more out of it. I was not that fortunate in this case, so I think a bunch of people bypassed it because of that. But yeah. So Pictassembler, it's kind of a complicated name. I thought that I could do really well with SEO by picking a completely unique word. But the downside of a completely unique word is that sometimes people don't know how to pronounce it. So nor do they know how to spell it, even though to me it doesn't seem that complicated, but it does make a difference. So that's something to keep in mind. I definitely wouldn't call it like, Origins of Shadow or something like that has a very like generic sounding name. But obviously there's a good place that you can meet in the middle for this. Again, I didn't do the playtesting, didn't get any feedback. The game suffered definitely because of it. I got some feedback from a lot of people that this one particular level was difficult by itself. So I should scale back the difficulty. And I didn't do that at first, and I think it suffered because of it. And then, yeah, the art was definitely the cause of the problem. The art's not any good. Hire artists, please, for the love of everything. Just put in the effort to do it. And if I were to do it again, I would have paid an artist to make better art. I would have gotten a professional sound person. And I also would have done just a ton more playtesting and gathered feedback. However, in the process of making this game and selling this game, I was able to approach a lot of game developers that I like, and a lot of media outlets and all that, like podcasters that I really like listening to. And I said, hey, I got this game. I really enjoy what you do. Have free copies of this. And if you like it, that's great. So because of this, I got to meet the developer Zach Barth, who's super, super friendly. He actually then offered to let me put some mechanics in it to do reporting of how people progress through the game. So that was really great. Got to meet a bunch of other podcasters. Drew Messenger Michaels, who does the Everybody's Talking at Once podcast, is really good. I was talking with him a bit. And as well as getting into the communities of these games that I'm also interested in. So I got really familiar with a lot of people in the Zachtronics Discord, a lot of people in puzzle game Discords. So it was just a really good way to, sort of learn the ropes with this stuff that is just really handy. Okay, so, and then I'll just get through this because I'm running out of time. I was able to get a shipped game under my belt, so now I feel very confident were I to ship another game. I think because of the mechanics of it, it lends itself well to another sequel, so another spiritual successor, so I'm working on that. And I also realized in that time that even if it's not much income, you still have a lot of passive income that can come in. And so the more games that you sell, the more passive income streams you can get from that. And especially if they are of a similar genre or similar style, even, they basically stack up. As more people get your game, more people will buy your games if they like them. So I've heard from authors before that they are able to sort of stack up their sales on an exponential curve because of that. So I think that's an interesting avenue to pursue financially. And that's it. I don't think we have any questions or any time for questions, really. But yeah, if you want to chit chat afterward or head out in the lobby, I'd be happy to talk to anybody about puzzle games or, going through this and making the game. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of BostonFIG Talks.